Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone, we are from short group Creative Writing subject. Today we will give you all an information about short story. First material is about definition of short story. According to Indonesian dictionary, short stories are short stories that contain no more than 10,000 words. In general, stories in short stories can give a dominant impression and concentrate on the problems of the one character. According to him, in the short story, there is no story up to 100 pages. According to Bakar Hamid, short stories are short stories that have characteristics such as a small number of words between 500 and 10,000 words in the short story and only has one character. And according to G.S. Badudu, short stories are short stories that focus and concentrate on one event. In this incident, there is only one character in the story. So, the definition of short story are literally works in written form that tell about a fictional story and then packaged in a short, clear, and concise manner. Short stories usually only tell a short story about the problems experienced by one character. Okay, that's about definition of short story. Next material about short story structure will be delivered from my friends.
Next, short story structure. Short story usually consists of the several necessary structure such as basic elements and abstract addition. This structure is very necessary when counting a short story. Here are some basic elements for building a short story. 1. Abstract. Abstract is an initial description of the story told. In the abstract short story, is usually used as a complement to the story. Therefore, the abstract is optional or may not exist in the short story. 2. Orientation. In the orientation of short story, it usually explains the background of the story such as the time, atmosphere, place or location used in the description of the short story. 3. Complication. Complication describes the structure related to the initial presentation of the problem faced by the character. The character of the characters is also explained in this section. 4. Evaluation. In this evaluation section, there is a conflict of problems that is getting worse. Conflict begins to research to reach the climax and get a solution to the problem that occur. 5. Resolution. Resolution is the final part of the problem that occur in the short story. In this section, there are explained from the author regarding the resolution to the problem experienced by the character. 6. Coda. Coda is moral value or message contained in a short story that is conveyed by the author to the reader. The moral message conveyed is in accord with the type of the short story.
Next, short story function. The recreational function is a means of entertainment for the reader. The aesthetic function is a distinct value or beauty that exists in the short story so as to provide satisfaction to the reader. The didactic function is to provide lesson or education that will be usable for reader. The function of morality is a moral value based on the content of the story to find out the good and bad that the author convey to the reader. The function of religious It is as a religious teacher who can later serve as a good example for reader.
Okay, next, characteristic of short story. First, in general, short stories are fictitious or in the form of another essay. Second, short stories have no more than 10,000 words. Third, when reading short story, you usually finish in one sitting. Next, short story have a very short story form. And short story have diction or choice of words that are not complicated, so that they are easily understood by reader. Next, short story only have a single storyline or one storyline. The story in short story usually come from events in everyday life. Next, the characteristics in the short story are very simple. And the last, at the end of the section, there is usually a very deep moral message that makes the reader feel the story in the short story.
Okay, next is types of short stories. Number one is short stories. As we know, a short story is a type of story that is less than 10,000 words in length. The first type of short story is short story. And as the name suggests, these short stories tend to be shorter than other type of short stories. The word length of short stories is about 500 to 700 words. This fictitious essay is usually used to explain an event in short, concise, attention-grabbing, and effective language. The opening session is usually very little, about 1 to 2 paragraphs. Then goes into the core conflict session. The endings are also usually less than other type of short stories. And number two is medium short. The second type of short story or short story is a medium short story. Medium short stories are usually around 700 to 1000 words long. Medium short story can also be found easily in school textbook because they are considered effective and attract attention. Medium short are slightly longer than short, so that the opening part will also be a little longer than a short story. In addition, the characterization of the characters told can be described in clearer sentence. Not only that, medium short stories are usually used to explain the story in more detail. And the last type of short story is long short story. The last type of short story is the long short story. The short story is usually met with a length of about 1000 words or more. And there is even a short story that is close to 5,000 words or even 10,000 words. This type of short story has a general characteristic that the narrative is relaxed because the author wants to tell a fairly long story. Usually, the opening and closing session are quite long as well. The process of entering the conflict session is also longer than usual, so the reader can better understand the story in more detail. Usually, this type of short story is rarely shown as textbook because it is quite long.
Next, short story extrinsic element. Number one, there is a background of the author. Number two, there is a community background. Number three, there is a biography that describes the complete biographical data, life history and experiences of the author. Number four, there is a literary genre that influences the language style used by the author when conveying the story. The last, there are psychological conditions in the form of happy, and sad conditions that affect the mood of the author when making a short story.
Next, illustration of the difference between novel, short stories, and romance. The similarity of novel, short stories, and romance are literally works that are presented in narrative manner. But there is a difference between novel, short stories, and romance. Novel tell some of extraordinary life, the occurrence of conflict to cause a change in the fate of the character. There is more than one plot or storyline. There are several incidents that affect the storyline. Characterization are written in depth. Short stories. The storyline is simple. The occurrence of conflict does not change the fate of the characters, only tell the life of the characters that are considered the most important. Characterization are not too detailed. Romance. The plot is complex. The occurrence of conflict change the fate of the characters tragically. Tell the life of the characters in detail from birth to adulthood, even death. The characters are written in more detail.